For those of you who thought, well, there's only a few of us, we'll get out early. Sorry.
No, I think we're sorry, because we keep distracting you.
Yeah.
Oh, this is good.
Well, it's here, Silva as an evangelization tool might want to consider turning up the heat in his church.
Don't put that in the suggestion box. I always liked this quote.
Very good. Keeping your conscience clear, so that afterwards you're not thinking, why did I say
Why
that?
did I
Why
say
did I do that?
Who was it? It was just somebody last week. Said, you know, I spent the first part of my life hearing really wise people talk, and oh, it was Kerry Harris at his ordination party. He said, I think, oh, I wish I'd said that. He says, in the last half of my life, I keep thinking to myself, why I wish I hadn't said that.
Wow.
So when we talk about evangelization and being, in situations like at work or something, and, how, like with Sharon, everybody knows now that she's Catholic and what she does, and she's just, weave that into her daily life. And I think that's very true, but I also think that when you say something, or when, you give an answer that's unexpected, or when you get caught in something you probably shouldn't have done, they're the first to notice. I expected that of everybody else, but not of you.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel about this small.
Yeah, you're telling a dirty joke,
Yes.
or listening to gossip, or
We're getting upset in a Facebook debate. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, you gotta be. And as a public minister, that's true of all of us. You have to be more careful than you ever had to be before. So I don't know if snake oil salesman means the same thing to everybody as it means to me. But that whole thing about gentleness and with conscience clear, I thought this would be a good.
Yeah.
So, John, you're in sales. Talk to me about objections.
Objections to...
In sales, when somebody, has do you look for objections? Do you try to avoid objections? What do you do?
I don't try to avoid them. The most important thing I always feel that I can do is I have this imaginary trust line, scale of 0 to 10. And my shtick, as it were, is not to push somebody to buy a house or to sell a house, but my objective is to build the trust line in small increments. And if I can get up to an 8 or so, I know it doesn't matter whether it's now or a year or 2 years from now, they won't buy or sell a house from anyone else. If I can build that trust line. And so the relationship is, when they are going to object, is to listen to them, to respond honestly and have a reason that I can agree or disagree with them, and just be sometimes brutally honest. And I will tell someone frequently, I will not always tell you what you want to hear, but to the best of my knowledge, I will always tell you the truth. And then, so to move in increments, small increments from the 0 up to that 8 or 10, I have what I have labeled trust deposits. So when I show up on time, or when I return a phone call, or when I listen, or those are all trust deposits. Whereas somebody telling me, I don't like this house because, and by saying you should buy this house anyway because, is a trust withdrawal. And so you can move the opposite direction as well. So I don't discourage objections. I do believe sometimes you have to restate the objection and say, I understand this is what you're telling me, and this is what I'm hearing. I think if you looked at it from this perspective, you might
See it differently.
See things a little differently. So I think respectful listening is incredibly important, but it's really, I was thinking about this a few pages ago when you talked about trust and
thresholds of
building. Yes. So when we The most important thing that I can do is build trust and demonstrate my knowledge or professionalism or success in the industry so that I become believable. So, but building that trust is the most important thing I can do. One of the ways to do that is to take time to listen to objections.
And I think an objection can be an opportunity to build trust.
You bet it is, absolutely.
Yeah, I was in sales for a number of years, and you begin to listen for buyers' questions. Some questions are just wasted time questions, but some questions you only ask if you're interested. And you begin to listen for those questions, because those mean that the person really is on the road to buying from you, and but they have this problem. I'd like to buy from you, but that's what they're saying.
Right.
I'd like to buy from you, but this seems too expensive. Or I'd like to buy from you, but this doesn't seem like very good quality. Or I'd like to buy from you, but I need it faster than you can give it to me. Or whatever it is. Well, in evangelization, there's objections too. So, science is often an objection for people in that. Well, science has proven that religion is untrue, right? We all know that. I always am leery of people who want to counter-impose science and religion, as if they are, well, you can't believe both.
Yeah.
So I believe religion, and who cares what science says? Well, that's, truth is truth. And there's a number of ways to get to the truth. And there's particular what we call competencies. Science has a particular competency, which is not religion's competency. So, science talks about things like, the origin of things and and how things work. That's the competence of science. Religion talks about the meaning of things. Science can't tell you what the meaning of extraterrestrial life is, or what the meaning of the distance between the sun and the earth is. It can only measure that. And religion can't tell you how long creation took.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of competence. The church has always talked about truth, goodness, and beauty as the three things that lead you to God. Well, there's truth in science. And so, if there's truth in science, that can lead you to God. You have to be, like any other truth, you have to be open to it. You have to realize where their competency ends, and they're venturing into the area of meaning. And then that's where you have to put up the wall and say, wait a minute, that's really, science can't tell us that. I'm always reminded of the cosmonauts back in the 50s, the first Russians in space, and they said, well, we're up in the heavens and there's no God. We're up here and he's not here, so.
Whereas a believer would say, we're up in the heavens and there definitely is a God.
Yeah.
I always tell the RCI class that they answer two different sets of questions.
Exactly.
The science tells us maybe how, whereas the religion tells us why.
That's an excellent way to put it.
Yeah.
Human values.
I remember being so shocked in like '99 when we were still taking RCIA and reading, I don't know if it was an encyclical or a document or a sermon, but it was by Pope John Paul II about evolution. And he talked about how God can use evolution as a form of creation. And that as long as we believe that the soul is eternal, and the soul comes from God, everything else, and I'm probably not summing it up exactly right, but everything else could be just exactly as science explains it to us. And that was just such a breath of fresh air to me, because being in like an evangelical fundamental background, it was either creationism or evolutionism.
Right.
You couldn't believe in both. And here was the Pope saying, God can use evolution as a form of creation. Yeah.
And that was important to me too.
Yeah.
To realize that was not contrary. Because so many things that stand to reason scientifically, you run into these religious objections to them. and vice versa, you know. But it is, it's, you know, human values, the meaning of things, that's the competence of religion. And how, you know, the other is what science teaches. A story about two college professors, and one was a devout Christian and the other was an atheist. But the Christian taught astronomy. And the atheist came into his office one day and he had this beautiful model, the Christian astronomer had this beautiful model of the solar system. And it was motorized, so it actually moved. So you could see the planets moving around the sun and in the different orbits, and it was just a gorgeous, beautiful thing. And the atheist looked at that and said, I never noticed that in your office before. That's just a beautiful working model of the solar system. Who made that? and the Christian said, oh, that just happened.
Perfect. What is it? It just exploded in me.
That's great.
And then, of course, there is evil. Evil is a major objection. One of the things that was always helpful for me in terms of the problem of evil, it was, where does our sense of fair play come from? C.S. Lewis asked that question. You know, when people encounter evil in their lives, generally their first reaction to that, the first thing they say is, well, that's not fair. That's not fair. My mother's 40 years old, she got cancer at 40 years old. That's not fair. Well, so, I mean, who knows what, ultimately, the mystery of evil and what that is. But C.S. Lewis asked the question, where did our idea of what's fair come from? Because it doesn't come from experience. Because in our experience, there's so much that isn't fair. So why do we rebel inside when things don't seem fair? You'd think we'd be used to it.
Yeah.
We wouldn't expect fairness
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
So to him, that's a proof of the existence of God. Just the fact that we have this inside that tells us
So we have a sense of fairness, even though the world,
is not.
our own experience isn't fair, but we have that innate sense of fairness.
And he says it's the first thing when a kid learns to talk, it's Mama, Papa, that's not fair. And it's true.
Yes.
So, I was getting earlier in the thing, I have Thomas Aquinas' 5 proofs of the existence of God in here somewhere, but I didn't do it today. At some point, if you've never looked at that, look at it, that's interesting. Well, one of the interesting, C.S. Lewis has this particular proof of the existence of God that sort of comes from the same idea. He says, if the universe is a random act, it's just an act of chance, exploding chemistry in the solar system or whatever. If that's true, then everything about us is also random. Our makeup, everything about the human person is random. It's not created. It's not intelligent design. It's random. So the synapses that fire in your brain that give you ideas, well, those are also random. You can't equate them with truth. The whole idea of truth is ridiculous if everything is random. Well, so you're forced into a contradiction. How can the idea that there is no God be true if the very idea of truth is just the random firings of synapses in your brain? It's a self-contradiction. I find that proof to be compelling. Now, I've explained this proof to my wife many times. And every time I hear it, she goes, you find it comforting. She says, I don't get it. And she's not dumb, so it's just something in me. But
So he's saying that if the world is random, if the world coming into being is random, then we must also be random as well. Every idea we have, everything
is just chemicals firing.
And that doesn't make sense because we don't feel like our ideas are random.
Well, it might make perfect sense, but then you can't claim truth coming from that. How can you claim that anything's true if there is no thing as truth.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's just the random firings of the synapses in my brain saying that there is no God, well, fine. Your brain is firing that way, but what does that mean?
But
It's
wasn't that
just-
buttress the atheist argument in saying there is no truth then? I mean, they don't believe there's a truth except maybe the
But,
truth of atheism.
but see, that's the catch.
Yeah,
Is that accept the truth of atheism. Well, how can it be true if there is no
if
truth?
everything's random.
If everything's random, where did you come up with that idea?
Okay.
You know, it was just random firings in your brain. Well, what makes that any more true than anything else?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are more objections. Free will versus God's omnipotence. This is more of an argument that you get into with other Christians. Living as I did in Evergreen Park with so many Dutch Reformed, their emphasis is really the sovereignty of God.
Calvinism.
Calvinism,
Yeah.
double predestination. Not only are some predestined to be saved, but some are predestined to be damned. The saved are saved because of God's free will in saving them. The damned are damned because God is equally free to damn them. It has nothing to do with what we do. You can live the best life in the world, the worst life in the world, the worst life he could choose to save, the best life he could choose to damn. He's totally free to do that. But what it takes out of the equation is free will.
Yeah.
It doesn't, then I have no self-determination here. I am just a leaf in the wind. So that, to me, that's a problem. But you do have that, it is a serious question, is if God is all-powerful and wills that all be saved, how can a human resist that will? Because we say that. God wills that all be saved. Well, if God wills it, it must happen, right?
But he's not going to force it.
There's the rub.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of conversations that it's interesting to get into, but there's really no answer.
Well, we just were reading an RCIA last night or the night before last about the passage where we were talking about prayer, and I read the passage where if a son asks for a fish, what father would give him a stone? The son asks for something else, what father would give him snakes or something. How much more would a loving father answer those who seek and who ask? To me, the idea that people are predestined to salvation or to damnation would just be so totally against that right there. Someone coming forward and asking God to receive him and to ask him for salvation, and no, that's not going to happen to you because you're predestined to be damned. That just, to me, it poses such a huge contradiction.
And it takes you out of the realm of a personal God.
Yeah, definitely.
Because if God has decided all this, it's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
It can't be personal at all.
Yeah, yeah.
So, that's another problem with it. Very often, paradox is a window into the truth. In dying we live, right? In giving we receive. So it's one of those things. It's both are true. It's a both and thing, not an either or thing. So, but you do get into this conversation with people from that.
Well, I had one Calvinist who said to me, he said, okay, haven't you met people in your life who no matter what you talk to them about with religion, they want to have nothing to do with it. They just don't talk about church to me. My stepdad was that way. I never want to go to a church and, fall down if I did go in. And then you meet people who are open and receptive. And he said, well, those are the ones who are predestined. The ones that show no interest, they never will. They're predestined to go to hell. Those who show an interest and are open, those are the ones who God has chosen to go to heaven. Those are the elect. That's the way he's thinking.
And I think, in that tradition, there is that strain that says that there's a way to tell.
Yeah.
By how people are.
How they respond.
But it seems to me that that's a little bit of a rationalization for a doctrine that's otherwise very hard to defend.
Yeah.
Because, we all know people who don't respond to religion because of something that's happened to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their parents were very religious and their parents beat them. Or
Yeah.
there was sexual abuse in the home, or
Yeah.
whatever, you know, and that was one of the real pains of the sexual abuse crisis. So here's people coming to church, trusting their clergy, and then their clergy are abusing their children.
Mm-hmm.
Well, boy, it would be very hard to go back to church after that.
Mm-hmm.
So are those people predestined to damnation, or is there some other reason why they're not open to going to
Yeah.
church?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it leaves out that human experience.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we all be predestined then?
but yeah, that's what they
Because,
say.
yeah,
You know, that
Either
there are,
one way or the other, you're predestined.
and that you know, there's an elect. And they would say, and this is the last weekend scripture, well, not weekend, but the All Saints Day scripture, 144,000. You know, the number. Well, they will say, well, that's, God's chosen that number.
That's what the Jehovah's Witnesses would say.
But you read that passage, the very next line in that passage is, and there were countless others.
Yeah.
So Scripture doesn't. I mean, even obviously that's 144,000 is a symbolic number, but even Scripture says that it's countless. It's a you know a countless number. So anyway, next objection is the problem of pain. C.S. Lewis has a great book called The Problem of Pain that really examines it from a number of different points of view. Short little thing, 120 pages maybe. Paperback, available in paperback, like everything he does is. 50th anniversary of his death is coming up. He died the same day that John F. Kennedy died.
Oh, November 22nd, 63?
Yeah. Sort of escaped attention because of John F. Kennedy died.
Yeah, we've lost someone who had more impact than John F. Kennedy, that's for sure.
And here, the problem with pain is this: either God doesn't exist, or isn't in control, or doesn't care. That's how people will pose it to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
Doesn't care, what was the other one?
Or isn't in control.
Isn't in control,
Somebody said the more sensitive to suffering we are, the closer to God we are. And paradoxically, the more vulnerable we are to doubting the existence of God because of suffering. So that the more sensitive you are to suffering, the closer to God you are, the more you're inclined to doubt God because you're sensitive to the suffering. I'm not going to keep you over, so don't worry. I'm trying to keep an eye on this. We were married a brief time. We just had our first child, and we lived in this apartment building. And the people across the hall had also just had a child, just a couple of weeks before ours. So 2 young couples living across the hall from each other, both with young babies. So we were close. And one night, about 2 weeks before Christmas, a woman across the hall comes over beating on our door. Peyton's not breathing. And we ran across the hall, and the child was dead.
Oh.
So a terrible week of preparing for that funeral and trying to hold this couple together. And it was SIDS, it was just SIDS. And that in every moment that we weren't worried about our neighbors, I was standing in the room with the crib watching my son breathe.
Yeah.
So anyway, baby's buried, and it's Christmas. And I'll never forget, we were leaving church after midnight mass, and it was snowing. And it occurred to me that this was the mystery of Christmas. That there is some pain that cannot be explained, that is so intense, it's heartbreaking, it's destructive in every way. And there's no way to make sense of it. And God knew that. So God became one of us to hold our hand in the dark. And that's still what Christmas means to me. That God didn't want to leave us alone with that. He knew that it was going to be meaningless, that maybe from his perspective he understands. We're never going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the least I can do is come and be with him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that I can come to with pain. Now, one of the similes that's often used is you know, when a surgeon cuts, it's damaging. And it creates pain. And nobody wants pain. But once the surgeon starts to cut, you certainly don't want him to stop. Because then all the pain you've gone through will be meaningless. The surgeon has to complete the cut in order for healing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true in life, is that there is going to be pain in life, and who knows what the reason for it is. But we have to go through it, because if we don't, we'll never get to the healing on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And God knows that healing's waiting.
Mm-hmm. And it may not even be this slight.
It might not be.
Yeah. That's kind of Hebrews. That's, to me, that God coming to identify with our sorrows and our pain. That's, we're reading Hebrews or just finished.
In the New Testament?
Yeah.
It's, when you're working with someone who is in real pain, there's nothing you can say that's going to make sense of it.
You just have to be there.
You just have to be there. It's
Yeah.
just presence.
Yeah.
And so aside from helping me make sense of the mystery of Christmas, it's also, for me, all about the fundamental truth of ministry. Is it really isn't about the answers I give people at all. It's about being with them.
Mm-hmm.
If you sit with someone, that's all that matters. When you go to a funeral, what can you say?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry for your loss. Not everybody says that. The smart ones say that.
Mm-hmm.
The worst, the people who aren't so smart say things like, "Oh, they're better off now.
This is God's will.
This is God's will."
Yeah.
The things that make it actually more painful.
Mm-hmm.
So all you can say is, I'm sorry that you're in pain, and but if you've experienced somebody in your life dying, you know how important it is when you sit at the wake and people come up, or they just come and sign the book and sit in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of those people means something, just because they came.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the presence. It's all about ministry of presence. So,
And it takes discipline sometimes when you want to say something to really not to know that no, this isn't the time.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, at my mother's funeral, good friends, very good friends, for a long time, came up to me and said, "We know how you feel. This is my mother's funeral. Our dog just died."
Oh, jeez.
Now, I love dogs, and, I can understand what a loss losing your dog is. But is that really something you want to say to somebody at their mother's funeral?
Oh my.
I know my jaw dropped open. What I said to them was, "I'm sorry for your loss." What else could I say?
Yeah, that was a good response. I'm afraid of what I would have said.
But they walked away and I thought,
Yeah.
what the heck was that? The previous slide about the story of the bamboo, that's similar to the whole thing about the surgeon cutting. Basically, in a nutshell, the bamboo says, "I want to be used," and so the guy says, "Well, I'm going to have to cut you down." "Oh, but I won't get to stand in the wind and the rain." And if you want to be used, I got to cut you down.
Mm-hmm.
"Okay, well, cut me down." So he cuts. "Well, I'm going to have to shave all your branches off." "Oh no, please, no, don't do that. That's my beauty, is the branch." "Oh, well, if you want to be used, I can shave your branches off, and then I have to cut your hand." "You have to cut me in half. I won't even look like a bamboo shoot anymore. Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
This is what I have to do." "Okay." Well, then the craftsman uses the bamboo to bring water from a place where there is water, is water, to a place where there is none, to give life to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So the purpose is fulfilled, but all the pain had to be gone through. So, but you can't say that to a person in the middle of the pain.
Yeah.
So relativism. My son was in high school, my youngest one, and he got busted in school for using marijuana. And we just went nuts. His mother and I. How can you be doing this? Our whole lives, we've told you about, just say no. He says, "But there are so many other voices." That was his answer.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many other voices.
Mm-hmm.
So C.S. Lewis says just because there's an infinite number of wrong answers to a problem doesn't mean there's a right answer. And that's where relativism comes in, I think. People say, well, there's so many truths out there. You were saying it earlier, Gene. So many truths out there, you know, they're all true, or they're all equally false, or whatever you want to say. Well, just because there's a lot of answers out there doesn't mean that they're all true, or equally true.
What was it, Pope Benedict, who said the biggest threat to society was the heresy of moral relativism? He said that was the biggest threat.
Well, because it's so insidious.
Yeah.
Because that's what, you know, I find this, and we'll get to the Catholicism stuff in a minute, but, you know, well, you know, it's okay to slam Catholics. It's not okay to slam any other group. It's politically incorrect to slam everybody else, but it's okay to slam Catholics. Well, and part of that is this relativism thing. Well, Catholics think they have it right, so we can just, we can disparage them, that's okay. Well, I don't know. You know the song, It Ain't Necessarily So? Anybody a musical fan? You know? Porgy and Bess.
Yeah, from Porgy and Bess, yeah.
George Gershwin.
Yeah.
George and Ira, I suppose. Do you know the song? It ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible ain't necessarily so. Methuselah lived 900 years. Methuselah lived 900 years. But who'd call that living? 'Cause no gal would give him to no man who's 900 years. So, that goes back, I think, to the conversation we were having about literalism in the Bible, you know, and dealing with the objections to Christianity and to belief, you have to deal with those things. And how do you address someone that has those kind of fundamentalist questions? And there are two ways that I'm learning really this year very personally. One is, you know, there are intellectual ways to do it, but the objection isn't often intellectual. Very often the objection is emotional. And you have to, and Mary Max actually was perfect with this woman. This woman called, I pointed at the church, that's where she was sitting, that's how I saw her. She called Mary Max and said, Richard said that the Bible isn't true. And Mary Max said, well, no, I don't think that's what he said. But then she said, but you know, this doesn't have to be a deal breaker. If you want to believe that every word in the Bible is literally true, you can still be Catholic and believe that. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt you. It's not what the church believes, but the church will let you believe that in law. And that was the perfect thing to say. It was pastorally sensitive. It left her where she was. You know, it didn't challenge her much, but I would have challenged her plenty. I was actually feeling guilty about pushing her around, you know. So anyway, objections to the church. Religious people are hypocrites.
Amen.
So, there's a double standard, I think, that goes on. You know, Mother Teresa, John Paul II, now Francis, there are these people who are held up as heroes. But when they're held up as heroes, very often, the treatment is, Mother Teresa is a saint. John Paul II is wonderful. Pope Francis is terrific. One priest, and it was more than one, admittedly, abuses a 12-year-old boy. The Catholic Church is evil.
Yeah.
You know, there's something unhealthy going on there. That we can't generalize from the positive, we only generalize from the negative.
Yeah.
And you know that's going on. So, objections to Catholicism. What have you heard?
Yes, all of those.
Yeah.
I mean, that really sums them all up.
I think that's all of them. If you can think of another one, Virginity of Mary. This is one of my favorite ones because people will say, well, now, you know, with our scientific advancements, we know that it's impossible for a woman to get pregnant without sexual intercourse. Well, first of all, that turns out not to be true with artificial insemination.
Yeah.
But aside from that, don't you think that people at the time of Jesus knew how women got pregnant. It wasn't like they wrote that story because they didn't know.
Well, Mary's response, how can this be? I'm not a man.
They say, hey, I always think that's I mean, sort of a humorous, you know.
Yeah.
Well, now that we know better. Yeah. This is when Mary and I do marriage prep, and we begin to go into the area of sexuality. And I often say, and God created the male and female, and then they made love. And God said, I didn't know they could do that. Stop that!
I'm the only creator.
Praying to Mary.
Yeah.
What's it, Matthew Kelly, I guess it is, says that every Catholic should carry a little card. May have them made up so you have a supply of them in your pocket. And for every Protestant who comes up to you and says, you Catholics pray to Mary, just, rather than go through it, just hand them the card. Purgatory.
Yeah. That was a tough one for me.
How would you come to with it?
Well, Carl Keating's book, Fundamentalism of Catholicism, well, both on Mary, but especially on purgatory. I think the argument that helped me the most was when he said that, do you think that the moment you die, that you're going to be ready to meet, that you're going to be not ready, you think you're going to be worthy to be in the presence of God? You know, be therefore perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. How are you different from the moment you die to the moment that you're in heaven? You know, that's what got to me, that there wasn't some sort of instantaneous change in character, and although I suppose some Protestants believe that, but
Yeah.
it just made sense to me. I think he explained it as a waiting room for a bride before she meets her groom. You know, that there's this room where she goes and she gets all beautiful and clean to meet her groom. You know, I like that explanation.
C.S. Lewis, you know, I can't speak for more than 10 minutes without bringing him up. He says that it's, you know, remember, he was Anglican, and the Anglicans have a specific teaching in the Book of Common Prayer against believing in purgatory. This is what C.S. Lewis says about purgatory. You're riding all night in the rain on a horse. So the mud is splashing up, but you're riding to the prince's castle. And you come through this horrible storm and you're covered in mud, and you get off the horse and you knock on the door. And the prince answers the door of the castle. He says, oh, we've been waiting the feast for you to arrive. I'm so glad you're here. Come on in. Well, the feast is ready. Wouldn't you say, would you mind if I cleaned up first?
Yeah. So C.S. Lewis was defending purgatory?
Yes.
Yeah. I had heard that had he lived longer, he was on the way, or was that
Well,
just legend?
I think that's more legend than anything. His brother, you know, he lived with Warren his whole life.
His brother?
His brother, Warren.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think there was a sense of, I think intellectually he had come to Catholicism. There's so many sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
But he couldn't abandon his brother. You know, we were in this together. You know, we've lived together our whole lives. I can't become a Catholic and leave you behind.
Mm-hmm.
So he just didn't. It was for his brother's sake.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think.
Do you remember where he talks about the purgatory? What book or?
I don't. If I think about it, maybe I will. If I come up with it later, maybe I'll let you know.
I'm interested to see what Aaron and Sarah say
Yeah. Real presence, that's a problem for people. You know, it's pretty clear in the Gospel of John in particular, I'm the bread of life.
Although, you know, I never hear people bring that up that much because I don't think they understand the distinction between what their church teaches and what the Catholic Church teaches, and I'm not even convinced that most Catholics understand the
I was
difference.
going to say the list, a lot of Catholics don't even get.
No.
Well, that's, you know, when people ask us why do we need a Eucharistic Congress, this is what we told people, is that, and there's a statistic, and it's astounding, 40% of Catholics don't believe in the real presence themselves.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe it's not an issue because nobody understands it, what
Yeah.
you're saying, but